There's two things that absolutely have to be discussed. One is a massive push for socialism. It's getting much, much more popular amongst our youth. It's getting much, much more popular around the world as a rising generation and a rising generation of new politicians push for this so-called utopia. Not learning from the past, not going back there and studying history and trying to find out, does this really work? Because there's not a single instance in history anywhere where socialism has ever worked. There is a dream for this utopia where all things are equal, all things are even, all things are supposedly fair, where those that are poor get subsidized by those that are rich. In every instance, it kills work ethic. People stop working. It is not worth it for them to put in more effort than their neighbor if they're not going to get the better benefits. Capitalism and being able to work off your own sweat, off your own labor, has always worked significantly better. You can look at these countries and tell a massive difference, and we're going to go over that here in a few minutes. The other thing we got to discuss is what is happening with the anti-Semitism that is going around the world, and this push to accept a Palestinian state that also has never worked and is not going to work. They do not understand the goals of the extremists in the Muslim world, the extremists in Hamas, the extremists in Hezbollah, and these others. You have a group of people in the Palestinians, you have groups of people in these other Muslim countries that do want to just live in peace, that do not care what's going on in other worlds. But sadly enough, they are not the ones in control. They're not the ones ruling their countries or making the decisions. And those who are in the decision-making power, that ruling class, that religious class that makes those decisions, all they want is the absolute destruction of Israel. They want all Jews dead. And from there, they're going to grow to the great Zionist, which is the United States, and destroy us. They want Sharia law throughout the world. They want to conquer the world, and it is not going to stop with Israel. It's not going to stop in the Middle East. And you can see what is happening throughout Europe and even in some parts of the United States where they've basically are invading and taking over certain communities within England and other communities within Europe. And they've attempted to take over communities here within the United States. There's a city down in Texas where they tried to implement completely Sharia law, and the Texas governor had to completely shut that down. And then there's other areas up in the Northeast, in the Michigan areas, in the Wisconsin and Minnesota areas where they're trying to attempt the same thing. You have to understand their mindset, and very, very few people do. We've discussed this in multiple episodes as well as other videos, that they do not negotiate. They do not understand what a 50-50 is. They do not understand what give and take is. They only understand power and authority. And if you start to negotiate with them, they only see that as a weakness. And that is the indication of when to strike. And that's when they do strike. They try to tear things down. In both instances, they have the socialists that want to grow socialism, the Muslims who want to grow Sharia law. They have a common goal, which is to destroy what we have. Now, what happens after everything is destroyed, they're going to start having that infighting because one wants socialism, the other wants Sharia law. But for right now, they're going to team up together to destroy what we have and what we've always known. That is their only goal. We are fighting absolute evil. We have to take this back to some very Christian principles. In the Bible, it shows that the end of days, World War III, the second coming of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, all stems down to the same things. It is where the world, including the United States, becomes so weakened and so debilitated that there's a lot of infighting and infighting within our own countries, infighting with other countries because of the weakened state that we're in. And that weakened state is caused by those who seek power, seek money, coming in and destroying the freedoms that we have, destroying the peace that we have, on purpose to overtake countries and get into a power situation where they are in absolute control. In that context, in the Bible, it shows that those end of days starts and ends with Israel. As the world turns against Israel, Israel's put into a situation where they are fighting their neighbors, fighting the world, and they're at the point of losing. One, Christ comes down and essentially saves them. And then they ask him, well, what are these marks in your hands and your feet? And he replies, these are the marks that I was given in the house of my friends. And then they learn who he is. But the point is it has always started and ending with the Jewish people. Now, taking that in context, we're going to demonstrate that outside of the religious context, those events are actually in motion, and it is going to ultimately destroy the world if we are not careful. The first thing we want to discuss is socialism and the rise of socialism within the world. Socialism has always existed since the 30s and 40s when Karl Marx came out and with his Communist Manifesto came out with these ideas that later was picked up by Lenin, who then implemented it within the USSR and became the Soviet Union. And then other countries started picking that up as well as the popularism of Karl Marx became more and more popular after his death. But in all instances of where socialism was tried to be implemented, it has always failed. There's this dream amongst those that are young that look at socialism where they think that there's some way to create a utopia. And they always look at socialism and say, well, those countries that failed didn't implement it correctly. And there is no correct way to implement it because it does not work. They are mixing what socialism is with what Christ wants to implement when he comes, which is more of a consecration type of ruling where all things become common and then there's no poor amongst us. But that can only be done by a perfect being, by someone who is never, ever going to be selfish, power hungry, money hungry, or anything else like that. When you're trying to implement a socialistic society, utopia amongst humans, amongst those who are obviously not perfect and have ambitions of their own, you are never going to create a utopia that is going to benefit anybody. There's always going to be those that stand up and want more power, want to become the dictator, and they want to rule, and things will absolutely never, ever be fair and equal. You look at the socialistic tendencies of Hitler and how he came to power, and yes, he had that socialistic mindset. You look at Lenin, Stalin, and their socialistic tendencies and what that did to their people. The only things that did was millions of people died, and the state ruled with an iron fist. You look at the socialistic economy of North Korea and what that dictator is doing. You look at what's happening right now in Venezuela and what that's creating. You look at the communist country of China and the absolute control that they have over their nation. We're going to look at a few cases here on socialism that people think is working and then the socialism that has never worked. When people think of socialism that works, they're always pointing at the same 5 countries. They're pointing at Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Iceland as the socialist utopias that we all need to work towards and have an example from these other nations. What they fail to understand is these countries are not completely socialistic. There's some socialistic laws that they have in place where they've got a government-run healthcare system. They have government-run education systems. They have government-run banks. There's a lot of redistribution of wealth. But year over year, if you look at all five of those countries, they're turning less and less socialistic as the free market begins to take over more and more. Go to those countries and you will find that the free market, that capitalism, is igniting in all five of those countries. You'll actually find that these five countries are becoming more and more like the United States and less like a socialistic Russia or other socialistic countries. The people will always push for more freedom and not less freedom. You're always going to have a certain class of people that believe that they can vote themselves in free stuff, free handouts, that they can work less, play more, have less work ethic, be a little more lazy, and they think that someone else is just going to do the work for them. That miraculously all these major companies are just going to keep functioning as they're functioning right now. Nothing's going to change. The only thing that's going to happen is we're going to take money from one source and give it to another. That way some people can work and others do not have to. Some people that have the extra talents and the brain capacity and their skill level that create these massive companies are just going to go right on doing exactly what they've always done, but with the difference that all of a sudden they're just going to start supporting everybody else of their own free will, or that the government's going to force them into sharing these massive amounts of money that they have. They don't understand that once you start removing that incentive of work, that everybody stops working. That these entrepreneurs that have created these massive companies will no longer start working to create massive companies, because the work ethic that they've generated comes from knowing that they're going to get a certain reward for their efforts. But when you take away that reward, they have no interest in building big companies. So you look at future generations, there's going to be no entrepreneurs growing. There's going to be no one there to create great businesses. There's going to be no one there to take over these other big businesses, because it takes a significant amount of time, effort, brain power, skill levels to be able to manage that. And the entire society starts deteriorating until there is nothing. You look at current Venezuela right now, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. There's not enough to go around. They do not have just simple daily necessities to be able to survive on. Now, we're going to look at some specific examples of this, and we're going to walk through a few countries to show you exactly how socialism is and is not working around the world. So looking at a group of countries that are currently either socialistic or have a socialistic party in control around the world here in 2025. You look at Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Spain, Venezuela, Chile, Bolivia, Honduras, Iceland, Greenland, all have a socialistic party in control. But what you see amongst all these countries is they had great societies that had a lot more power and wealth, and within the last few years, their gross domestic product, their production is all going down. They're having major issues in trying to keep that economy moving because of socialistic tendencies. They're redistributing a significant amount of wealth, and again, the incentive just deteriorates amongst those who are working. So now their entire economy is going down. You look at Chile, for example, that I spent several years down in there. They had one of the biggest and best economies in all of South America, by far. And as soon as they voted in this new socialistic party, it's been deteriorating rapidly over the last few years, to where you look at their gross domestic product, you look at what they're exporting and importing, you look at the economy that they're putting out there, and it's significantly less than it was just a few years ago. You look at countries like Colombia and Mexico, where cartels have completely taken over. And the reason they've taken over is because it's such a poor society that is handled and managed so miserably that people are desperate to find any source of income. And then they look to the cartels And the cartels become more and more powerful because they take advantage of the people. They take advantage of a society that is not taking care of its own. And it all comes back to that socialism, where they're not allowed to grow and prosper because that's the socialism that is there. You look at Venezuela. Venezuela's been completely taken over by a dictator, but before the dictator took over, they went socialistic. Socialism always leads to dictatorship. If you look at Chile back down in the 70s and early 80s, they had a president that was kicked out, and he was kicked out by the military. The military just came in and took over. Now, the first intention was the military was to kick out the original government and then set up a new government entity under the control and power of the people, which would have been a lot better. But the problem is Pinochet, who was running the military then, came in and took over, and he didn't relinquish that power. They were a socialistic state at the time, and the economy was suffering so bad that the people just kind of were rising up against the government. And that shows that the socialism doesn't work, because the economy dropped so fast and so precipitously that the people did nothing but rise up and wanted to get rid of that socialistic government. They couldn't stand what was happening. But socialism always leads to a dictator. And as Pinochet came into office and became the president of the country, he continued the socialistic program. And you'll look at countries like Yugoslavia and others within the Baltic states that also ran socialism. The party takes over. And socialism is just a small step down from communism. In fact, they can almost be dealt with synonymously. There are different levels of socialism where you have socialist tendencies, but then the absolute socialism is communism. It leads to that where the government controls everything, dictates everything, controls who works where, how you work, controls the money and what you pay for everything. They control the health care, and because of that, everything deteriorates. But the more important thing behind that is the party becomes the dominant entity. And then there's two sides of the party. You have the government workers, who are the party that run the entire government. And then they're the one that gets the favoritism. They're the one that gets the special handouts. They're the ones that get taken care of. And everything that gets bled from the people supports the party. Then you have normal civilians that are party members, and they're probably the next level being taken care of, but not to the extent that the actual government officials are. You have the group of people who are trying to just kind of stay anonymous. They don't want to be part of the socialistic state, but they also don't want to bring any attention to themselves. And they're just trying to live out their lives and just arm's length from everything that's going on within the state. And then you'll have always the activists who are trying to overthrow socialism, that sees it for what it is and are trying to get rid of that state, get rid of the government. This is where the party starts doing the devilish things, because then people just start up and disappearing. You say anything against the government, you say anything against the party, and all of a sudden you disappear. No one ever sees you again. We saw that a lot with Pinochet. I was down there and heard many stories about how people had just slightest little words and they just disappeared, because their friends and neighbors start turning them in. It works is you turn everybody against each other. And you don't think that this is real? Look at COVID. Look what happened during COVID, because that is where the state, the party, takes over. And people all of a sudden feel this moral obligation to turn in their friends and neighbors for not wearing a mask, for not getting the jab. We turn on each other, and that's how socialism works, is turning the people against each other, and all of a sudden everybody's afraid to say anything. Your freedom of speech, the freedom of press is the first things that go out the window. Because if you say anything wrong, you disappear, you die. And the state or the party completely takes over. There were instances and stories that I saw or heard from firsthand experiences while I lived down in Chile for a while, where there was a nightly curfew, and if you were caught after the curfew, the police would capture you and you just disappear. There's an instance where a father was on his way home from work. It was late. He was probably just a few minutes after the curfew of getting to his home. He was literally within 1 or 2 houses distance from his house, where the police caught up and said, "What are you doing out after curfew?" He says, he explained his job, explained what he's doing. They could hear it from the windows. And he says, "My home is right there. It's just 2 doors down. Just let me go home and nothing will speak of it." They didn't have any tolerance for that. And they literally shot him in the head, killed him in cold blood right there in the middle of the street, while his wife and kids looked out the window and saw it. That is what socialism is. When the state, when the party takes over, that's what happens. And you'll have a young group of people that think that, no, that's not going to happen. That's not running socialism correctly. All they see is the redistribution of wealth. All they see is, I'm going to get taken care of. They only see the glory in the clouds utopia that they're dreaming of. And that does not exist within socialism. That does not exist within communism. Because a dictator always takes over, a party always takes over, and then they're the only ones that get taken care of, those who toe the hard line with the party. And you talk to anybody that comes from a hardened socialistic state, and they will give you these examples. Talk to anybody that came from the Baltic countries. Talk to somebody that lived during these times during Chile, or currently living during those times down in Venezuela. You talk to anybody coming from communist China who are not completely indoctrinated into the party, and they'll tell you that they have lost their freedoms completely and that the government dictates everything. That is not a utopia. That is complete and absolute control by the government. You do not have any rights. You do not have any freedoms. It is not the United States just with wealth just redistributed. The economy just doesn't keep going as it is right now, and all it is just wealth redistributed, and all of a sudden it becomes fair. That is a vain ambition that will never, ever, ever become a reality. And if you believe that somehow that's going to happen, then you are absolutely blind to history. That is not what socialism leads to. And again, if you look to any of these other countries and think that they're running a socialistic utopia, then you are fooling yourself, because none of these other countries are completely socialistic. The party hasn't taken over. They are significantly more capitalistic than they are socialistic. But look at what we're happening in our own nation, where you have the left that is pushing for this socialism, where they want to have a government health care. They want to have government-run banks. They want to have government-run education systems. They're trying to take this step by step towards that socialism, to where they rule, they dictate, everything goes on, and then all the freedoms that you thought you enjoyed, that you thought you'd continue to enjoy in a socialistic state, just with wealth being redistributed, they're all gone. You've lost it all, and all of a sudden the dark reality will set in, and you'll understand that no, socialism is not a utopia. It is a dictatorship that leads to a dark economy, a dark world where people die and freedoms are absolutely gone. Look at the nations that currently have a socialistic constitution, not just a party, but a constitution. You look at India, Bangladesh, Algeria, Nepal, North Korea, Sri Lanka, Nicaragua, Guyana, any of these nations, and tell me any of them that are currently functioning at a high level, where they have absolutely booming economies, where they don't have any poor, that all the poor people are being taken care of, that they have plenty of food, that they have plenty of health care. Not a single one of them has enough food to feed their own people. Not a single one of them has the absolute health care that just takes care of everybody. They don't have it. Look at even Canada and them trying to have a universal health care where they have to wait a year to 15 months just to get an MRI on a tumor in their head. This does not work, and people got to stop thinking that it does work. What it leads to is a dictatorship, communism, and a party control to where there is no freedom, none. There's no free speech. There's no freedom of the press. Movies die, press die, because you can't have anything that speaks against the party. And then businesses start dying, the economy starts dying because people stop working. They do not have the incentive to do anything. You cannot force them to have these absolutely booming businesses. You can't force entrepreneurs to go out and create a massive company if they're not going to get the rewards of that. It's just human nature. It does not ever work. Now look at all the countries that did have socialism, and all of them have since gotten rid of socialism and are trying to pattern their countries after the United States and actually put in constitutions to where their economies can start growing. Their lower and middle classes can actually start growing because now they can depend on the people growing the economy for them because the government steps back and gets out of the way. And you'll look at all these countries from where they were eons ago to where they are now, and you'll find that they're all growing. Only an exception of that would be countries that are run by Sharia law or countries that are corrupt like Ukraine that try to put in some semblance of a capitalism government, but the government has never gotten completely out of their corruption. You'll notice that the vast majority of these countries that did have socialistic constitutions are within Africa or within the European Union. And they split from the Soviet Union, where they knew out of history and out of experience, their parents and grandparents are telling them that this program does not work, and how they're pushing more and more to not be like the Soviet Union, but to be more like the United States. The United States has always been that beacon in the world to stand up for rights and freedoms of people. There has never, ever in the history of the world been a more powerful nation than the United States. And the reason why we're so powerful is because of the freedoms we have, the capitalistic market, and the being able to come here and create something out of yourself, to have that ability to, from your own sweat and your own labor, to create something that cannot be taken from you, cannot be redistributed. That creates wealth. When you know that even if you fail, you're in a country where you can try again and try again and try again, and have the effort and the fortitude and the drive to be able to make yourself successful. There is no country in the world where everybody in the world is trying to get into that country, trying to immigrate to that country like the United States. There is nobody in the world trying to get into China. There is nobody in the world trying to get into Venezuela. There is nobody in the world trying to massively immigrate to Russia. That does not exist. The only country in which everybody's trying to massively immigrate to is the United States, and it's because of the freedoms we have and the American dream. And what is the American dream? The American dream is freedom. It's the ability to create something out of your own hands that belongs to you, that you can reap the rewards of, and if you want to become a millionaire or billionaire, you can become that because of the efforts that you put into it. But there's a certain level of pride, there's a certain level of envy and greed and selfishness that looks up from everybody else who are not putting in that effort and says, you shouldn't have that. You shouldn't have that much money. You shouldn't be a billionaire. You shouldn't be a millionaire. You need to redistribute that wealth. Why are you so powerful? Why do you have so much money? And they don't understand the work ethic, the drive, the amount of effort that goes into that, to creating something literally out of your basement, out of your garage, out of your house, and creates into something massively. They just don't have the understanding of how that was created because they don't have that drive within themselves. They don't have that work ethic within themselves. And there's always going to be that. There's always going to be a group of people that have absolute drive, and there's always going to have a group of people that just want to sit back and get taken care of, put as little effort in as possible, and just have everything that the rich have. And it just doesn't work that way. Socialism is not the utopia that they're thinking of. It is not where everything runs as is, as you see right now. And that you can guarantee that's what they're thinking is nothing's going to change in the economy. Nothing's going to change in the businesses. The only thing that's going to happen is we're going to take money from one source and give it to another source that don't work as hard. They don't have the effort into it. And then all of a sudden, everybody's going to have wealth. Those that work for it and those who don't, it just gets given to them. And when something is just given to you, you don't appreciate it. There's no gratitude there. You take advantage of it, you abuse it, and then you knock it down and you destroy it. It's the natural tendency of how things work. And those where that wealth is getting taken from them, they work less, they try less, and those businesses fail. Now you look at the countries that have taken socialism and created communism out of them, because again, you can't separate the two. You'll have socialistic tendencies and certain socialistic principles within the country, like universal health care, universal education, or something like that. But as you become more and more socialistic and you become what we call that perfect socialism or that perfect Marxism, that is communism. That's what that is. And you look at any communistic state like Cuba, Vietnam, China, and they're all failing. The only reason China has existed is because the sheer population of that country drives it. There's no other country out there with the population that China has. And so they take advantage of their own people, and their own people are absolutely poor. There's no utopia there. The divide between the rich and the poor, between those who are part of the party, again, the party is one that gets taken care of, and those who are on the bottom levels is extreme, because of those on the bottom levels, they're not considered important. They're not even considered a human half the time. All they are is just ants that are required to go out there and work and provide for those who are on the upper levels. That's the only reason they're even there. They don't have any rights. They don't have any privileges. Their only reason for existing is to provide for the upper levels. And that's what socialism turns into, is where you have a minority that becomes the party members, feel elite, that they're the elitists, that they're more important, that they have some right that they were born with that is above everybody else. And you see that with kings, you see that with dictators, and it always turns into that. Those who have power want more power, more money, more influence. And the poor get poorer, they don't get taken care of, and then the system either gets destroyed, falls apart, or has the absolute control that the communist country of China has on its own people. So you look at Cuba. They start providing free services to all of their key industries, and despite the challenges, Cuba tries to get into a social welfare program that completely destroys the country, because then they have a dictator down there, and as we all know, the country just fell apart. There's nothing good that's going on down in Cuba right now, and that's because it went completely socialistic, and from socialism to communism. You look at Vietnam, the same thing. You look at North Korea and the dictator that is now there. There is nothing lovely that's going on in North Korea. That is a socialistic state that everybody is dreaming of, is North Korea. And I can guarantee you no college campus student wants to go and live in North Korea right now. But yet that's what they're protesting for, driving for, trying to vote for, without even understanding it or realizing it, that that's what's going to happen, is it always will turn into a dictatorship. You look at what's happening in Venezuela. Venezuela's government focuses on redistributing wealth through social programs, yet the country faces severe economic turmoil and the shortages of basic necessities. That's what it always goes into because people stop working. There are massive, massive shortages. Historical socialistic societies, obviously you have the Soviet Union. They were established in 1917, sought to create a classless society through state control of resources, and then they fall apart years later under Reagan. Absolutely fall apart and become the Soviet Union that they are today. And they're still trying to practice some semblance of socialism, but yet, again, it's no longer completely socialistic. They have a dictator in Putin that's been in there for eons, but there's a lot of capitalism that's sinking into the society, and that's what's keeping them alive. If they went completely capitalistic, their economy would boom because they have one of the biggest land masses and a people that are absolutely patriotic about their country. They love their motherland. They love their mother country. They've got good work ethic over there. And if they would just pull the government back and let the people work, that'd probably be one of the most powerful countries in the world. But they keep the economy down. They keep the people down because of the socialism that remains, that is still there. So there's no instance, none. You cannot point to one. You can't even point again to Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Iceland. You can't point to those and tell me that that's the perfect socialistic utopia because they aren't complete socialistic. They have a partial socialism. And then the rest of the country is absolute capitalism. It's where they have free press. It's where they have the entrepreneurs are allowed to go out there and create massive companies. They're allowed to compete with each other. The state does not control the money. It does not control the businesses. It does not control the work ethic. It is not complete socialism. And again, year over year, they're becoming less and less socialistic as the government kind of pulls itself back and the people vote in more and more freedom. And the other big thing behind not being socialistic is the power to vote. If you're in a complete socialistic society, voting is no longer. There is no voting. You are not a representative government. That does not exist anymore. You do not have a Congress. You do not have democracy. That is gone in socialism. The party takes over, and it's a single-party country that always turns into a dictatorship. If you think that you're going to keep some kind of representative government when you have complete socialism, then you are fooling yourself because that is not what socialism is. That is not what communism is. Those are gone. And it's a slow path to that as people don't understand that as they bring in more and more socialism, more and more power goes to the government. So we look at what's happening right now. We look at the protests. We look at the riots. We look at the push in our universities, the absolute problems that are having, the crime rates that go up. And the left is actually pushing for those crime rates. You have leftists coming out and openly bad-mouthing and telling people that Trump is a dictator, that it would be okay to assassinate him, that you have leftists are coming out and promoting violence, where they're saying that it's not exactly wrong to attack ICE agents. It's not wrong to attack their homes, to attack their individuals, that the ICE agents that are going out mass because they want to protect themselves and their family, that is wrong, that they need to unmask. The only reason why they want ICE agents to unmask and others to unmask is so they can find out who they are and attack them. And the reason why they don't attack them is they want to foment such a bad taste in the mouth that the ICE agents quit. Stop becoming ICE agents. Stop doing what Trump's telling them to do. They want them to quit. And they want to create so much violence in the community. They want to create so much crime within the community that the community then goes to them as the government and begs them to fix it. And then their solution for fixing it is more power to the government. Give us the power and we'll come fix it. And that's where you get into martial law. And that's where the government starts taking over everything. And that's how they push towards socialism. In order to get socialism into a community, in order to get communism or even Sharia law into a community, you have to absolutely destroy everything that community has right now. You have to tear it down. And that's what they're trying to do right now. Look at what's happening in our communities. They are specifically pushing for violence against conservative leaders. They're specifically pushing for violence against police. We've seen that in the Black Lives Matter movement. We've seen that in the push to pull back the police power and authority over the last few years, especially underneath Biden and Obama. They want to push for that violence. They want to push for that breakdown in society. They want to purposely have society completely break down. Because only by breaking it down will society come back and give government more power. And then that's where those power-hungry people can then take over and bring in socialism, communism, dictatorship. And that's all they care about is that power to the elitists, power to them, and then they will never relinquish it. And all of a sudden, this great utopia that they were thinking of just becomes a dictatorship, just becomes a single party control where the party dictates everything, and those that speak out against it just start disappearing, never being seen from again, silently killed and just taken out of society. That's what it leads to. So we are dangerously going down that path. Now, Trump has kind of reversed that to where our crime rates have gone significantly down. ICE is out there doing their job. But there's a significant amount of people on the left, our own leaders within our states where you have state representatives in Maryland and these other states, in these other blue states. You have national representatives, U.S. House representatives, senators on the left, like Terry Booker, that are pushing for this violence and pushing to break down society. They purposely, again, want to break it down so that we, the people, will demand that it get fixed. And the only way to fix it is by giving them more power. So when you see them purposely driving for violence, that it's okay to rise up against ICE agents, that it's okay to rise up against your local leaders, when you need to get out in the streets and follow people around in restaurants and foment this violence, they purposely want to break down society. And they put out the rhetoric so much that those that are easily indoctrinated, that are easily fooled, will go out and try an assassination attempt on President Trump, which actually happened, because the rhetoric is so thick. They'll try open violence against ICE agents and throwing Molotov cocktails and breaking vehicles. And this all starts because they think they are validated by the rhetoric of the left. That is what they should do, that they are actually morally obligated to go out and do those things because the rhetoric of the left says that they're so evil, that they're as bad as Hitler, they're as bad as these other nations that are trying to essentially just kidnap people, that they are morally obligated out there and foment this violence and kill people. That's what they're fomenting. And again, the left knows that, and they're trying to skirt that line to foment enough violence in a way that their words can't be blamed for it, but yet it still breaks down society. And then once society breaks down, they step in and say, hey, we'll fix it. And the only thing they're going to fix is just getting more power, and then they're never going to fix the problem. It's been happening for years. Is they create racism, they create sexism, and they try to turn us as society against each other to foment more violence and break down society again. And saying, well, the whites are the problem. The conservative extremists are the problem. And they foment that violence and they foment that hatred amongst each other. And we saw this a lot during the Obama administration, where instead of bringing us together, he pulled us apart and really made a division between Republicans and Democrats, between those that are for these liberals, sexist type ideals and those that are more conservative. And it's created such a divide that now they're trying to take that divide and foment more violence with it and purposely destroy society. And then have society vote in more power to them. And that's how you break a nation. That's just how you break a nation. Then you'll have stuff like this, where the Socialist Manifesto, the case for radical politics in an area of extreme inequality. The more unequal society is, the more they're going to push to equalize it, to redistribute it. And again, the only purpose between equalizing it, redistributing it, is more power to the government until the party, the single party unit, takes control and it becomes essentially a dictatorship, to where the party rules, they're the elitists, they're the ones that get taken care of, and everybody else is subservient to them and only there to take care of them. It is not a utopia. It never becomes a utopia. It's the bottom feeding the elitists at the top, and those who say anything against that just disappear. So when you look at what's happening in society, look at how the left foments violence, look how the rhetoric foments violence, and understand the purpose behind that. The only purpose behind that rhetoric, the only purpose behind fomenting that violence, the only reason why we have Black Lives Matter movements, the only reason why we have these major protests, college campus problems, is to break our society down to a point where we will vote in more power to the government. And the more power the government takes, the more socialistic they become, the more communist it becomes, the more that party comes, and all of a sudden your freedoms are gone. It becomes a one-party state. Freedoms are gone. Freedom of speech is gone. Freedom of the press is gone. Freedom of religion is gone. The state becomes the religion. All other religions become evil, and you've lost everything. There is no utopia in socialism. There isn't. We as a society cannot let them win, ever. You cannot let them break down society. You cannot let them vote in even the least semblance of socialism. It cannot be. You cannot have a universal health care. And with Medicaid getting bigger, with Medicare getting bigger, with Social Security getting bigger, those are all things that are pushing us towards socialism. Those are socialistic principles. That's just what they are. It's a redistribution of wealth. Guys behind just taking care of people. Now, there's a way we can take care of people without turning socialistic, but that is not the goal of those programs. It is not the goal of those programs. So, with this video, I just want people to watch, and with a little bit more of a eye sensitive to what's going on. Look at the social violence, look at the rhetoric coming from the left, look at their push towards socialism, and understand that that is the evil. That is the very evil that we're fighting, because that will destroy this nation. We will not have the United States of America anymore if those principles take over. Recognize it for what it is. It is evil, and it has to be fought by our voices, by our votes, by us teaching one another and teaching the next generation especially that socialism is wrong and it is evil. And that the freedoms that this nation was born with is the only way this nation survives. There's a reason why our founding fathers broke away and created our Constitution with the freedoms that we have, because this is the best nation in the world. It has always been the best nation in the world, found under Judeo-Christian values, and it is those God-fearing values that give us those freedoms. They give us the drive to fight for those freedoms. They give us the fortitude to die for those freedoms. No other nation espouses that. We are born with it almost here in the United States, and it is something worthy of fighting for.